Yes, he was in Toronto. And I did see Brother John post a photo. Brother John had a photo taken, which he shared with the Prime Minister. But more importantly, though, this afternoon, we are we starting almost half an hour later than we scheduled to, but we are here with you as the saying goes, if something that can go wrong, it will. And a couple of things didn't go properly today. And so we are starting at this point in time. Dr. Tristan Smith has been waiting patiently for quite some time now. And we are pleased and we are blessed to have Dr. Tristan Smith being the guest on the heart of the matter here uh, this afternoon. And I want to thank him specially for coming on here. And given the fact that 2023 had not yet come to an end, 2023 had not yet come to an end. But Dr. Tristan Smith was reaching out to me to inquire whether I would be wanting him to join me at any time during 2024 and when would be that time, because he was putting his schedule together. So it tells you the way that Dr. Tristan Smith functions. And it is no wonder that he has been the cardiovascular wonder that he has turned out to be. Dr. Tristan Smith is originally from Guelph, is originally from Grenada. And I will allow him to introduce himself to you. By doing this, it is our independence celebration. Everyone has been telling the Grenadians, we have been telling the Grenadian story of our leaders and our individuals of note, whether they be in the sporting discipline, they be in the field of medicine, they be in the field of you name it, of fisheries, the field of any field of academics. We have been telling the story. So Dr. Tristan Smith, I'll allow him to tell you his Grenada story, okay, because he would have been born here and gone to school here and so on, in a nutshell. And then to give you his perspective on independence as a whole and the 50th anniversary of independence celebration, um, if he was privy to any of it. And I expect that he would have. Dr. Smith, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Raphael. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm very, very happy to be back on this program with you. As you said, I'm from Guelph. I was born in Guelph, Dong Street to be exact. And that's where I grew up. Spent a brief time in Guyana. We know what the geopolitical situation is there now. So I spent 5 years in Guyana and then came back to Grenada when I was around 11 years old. Attended the St. John's RC and then attended Shaper, where I did my O levels, etc. Then went to T.A. Marshall College, T.A. Marshall Community College, and then for a brief period of time did some teaching back at Shaper, my alma mater, as well as Happy Hill Secondary School. And I went to Cuba, did medicine there, graduated, came back to Grenada, worked for a while at the General Hospital, then at St. George's University, and then immigrated to the United States around 2008, where I then did my internal medicine residency, general cardiology, and then interventional cardiology and structural heart interventions. So at this point, what I do basically is I'm the person who, if someone is having a heart attack, would go in and open up the arteries of the heart and put stents in. And if someone has a bad valve, what I do is using catheters and non-invasive techniques, not having to open up the chest, I'm able to repair those valves and replace those valves in a very non-invasive manner. where patients are basically awake while I do this, and up and walking within 4 hours and home the next day. So it's been a wonderful journey, for me as a physician. From a professional standpoint, it's been very, very rewarding. And, to be from a small island of Grenada, I see, things that I do, they're just starting to do in other parts of the world, like, South America, and saw some posts a few weeks ago about some things that are now being done in Saudi Arabia, that I've done, a long time ago. So I feel very proud to be from a small island like Grenada and be able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished so far. And it just tells us what Grenada means and what Grenada stands for. The 50th celebration, I think, was very befitting of a country that's striving towards excellence. We're punching way above our weight class, and I think the celebrations for the 50th anniversary did show that the drone celebration was one of the highlights, that I liked. I think it showed a very good story for Grenada, but more so the conversation about Grenada, where we've been, the journeys we've had in the past 50 years, and where we intend to go in the next 50 years and beyond. I think having those discussions around this time was very, very important, so that we level set what our priorities are, and what we as a nation would determine that we want to do going forward. So I think it was all in all a very, not just a spectacular affair, but an affair that has also caused the consciousness of the society to get to a different level as we contemplate where we are, and where we should be, and where we're going. So I just give kudos to the organizers of the event. Besides the partying and everything else that went on, I think they were able to stir that nationalism that we need, the positive nationalism that we need, that will enable us to then build upon that foundation for the future.
Yes, Dr. Smith, I really do agree with you on that. Given the response that I've gotten from a couple of young people who would have approached me and said to me, words to the effect like they've never really taken on this independence episode before, but this time around they were into it, and it gave them a certain feeling and a certain sense of feeling, being a part of something bigger than themselves, and they were, some of them were very emotional. In fact, one young man said that, while at the stadium and the whole ceremony was going on, especially when the anthem was being sung, he was more or less almost moved to tears, And speaking of the anthem being sung, it is the first time I really saw Grenadians. Usually, you would hear the police band play the music, and you would hear a few scattered voices here and there, chiming in. But this time, in unison, the people were up on their feet and, belting out the national anthem. And it really, I mean, I for one, I got goosebumps when that was happening. So we have that situation, and the way the story has been told. You just shared with us part of your story here, and there's an element of your story that says that you are an interventional cardiologist. I believe you gave a bit of that, what that entails. But it also says that your top areas of expertise are endocarditis, angina. Am I pronouncing that right? Transient.
Angina, yeah.
Yeah, angina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Transient ischemic attack, TIA,
Yeah. Yeah.
transcatheter aortic valve replacement, and so on. Can you just elaborate on that for us? and let people have an appreciation as to the extent of your
Yeah.
expertise.
So cardiovascular disease is very broad. There are a lot of areas um, that requires attention, and not everyone can encompass everything. So within cardiovascular medicine, we have the electrophysiologists, and they're the ones who are specializing in the electrical system of the heart. The electrical system is very complex. There are a lot of diseases that affect the electrical system, and they basically deal with that. There are others who are preventative cardiovascular doctors, and they are the ones who would try to um, implement lifestyle modifications, medications, etc., to control blood pressure, um, keep an eye on weight, diet, etc., to prevent cardiovascular diseases. And all of us who practice medicine, regardless of the subspecialty, also do um, uh, primary prevention or preventative cardiology. What I do as an interventional cardiologist and structural heart specialist is putting stents into the coronary arteries. So when the coronary arteries or the arteries in the heart over time, when they become narrow, people can start having chest pain. Now that chest pain, um, we're now changing the discussion from chest pain to chest discomfort, because not everyone get a pain. Sometimes it's a heaviness, sometimes it's a sort of like a funny feeling, especially females. They don't present in the same way as men do. So we're trying to change the discussion from chest pain to chest discomfort. So as the arteries in the heart get narrower, it's more difficult for blood to flow through those arteries to get to the muscles of the heart. And that you start having that chest discomfort or chest pain that we call angina. And that angina can be alleviated by opening up those blockages. So in those cases, I consider myself sort of like a plumber of the heart, where I would go in and using balloons and stents, open up those areas that are blocked, put stents in to keep those arteries open. And of course, using the appropriate medicines to ensure that those stents remain open and they don't close off. So that's one of the things that I do for angina or chest pain. The other is TIAs or strokes. TIAs are transient ischemic attacks. They are what we call mini strokes. Many times people get these stroke-like symptoms that last for less than 24 to 48 hours. Um, and if there if there's no underlying reason for those strokes, let's say the patient does not have any blockages in the carotid arteries, for example, that can cause strokes. There are no clots within the heart that can cause strokes. Then the most likely reason for it would be a hole in the heart. There's a hole. We call it a hole. It's more like a tract in the heart. That's called the foramen ovale, and it's a normal remnant from the normal development of the heart. But in 1 out of 4 people, that hole does not close, and we then end up having what's called a PFO, a patent foramen ovale, so that blood can move from the right side of the heart to the left side of the heart without having to be filtered through the lungs. And if there are clots or anything that happens on the right side of the body, in the legs and the right side of the heart, then it can go through that hole and go up to the brain and cause strokes. So what I would do for that would be to close that hole without surgery by going in through the groin, through the vein in the groin, and putting devices into that hole to close them off to prevent the risk of strokes. So that's how we treat patients who are having TIAs. We call them, cryptogenic stroke. I'll be able to close those holes and decrease the risk of that happening. The transcatheter aortic valve replacements is one of those valve procedures that I do. So as patients age, when they get into their 70s, 80s, the aortic valve, which is one of the major valves in the heart, and is the one that allows blood to leave the left ventricle, which is the major pumping chamber of the heart, to go out into the body. That that valve becomes narrow over time, or it can become narrow over time. And when it becomes narrow, there's difficulty in getting blood to leave the left ventricle of the heart to go out into the body. So patients then develop shortness of breath, chest pains. Sometimes they can pass out. They have what we call a murmur across that valve. And the only way to treat that is by replacing the valve. Traditionally, the way this was done would be via opening up the chest, putting the patient to sleep, opening up the chest, getting to the heart, cutting the heart open, taking the valve out and putting a new one in. But we now can do transcatheter aortic valve replacements where we don't need to open up the chest. I'll give the patient just some light sedation and go through the groin. I get my catheters and valve into the heart and across that diseased aortic valve and place that new valve in. Incidentally, while we were on that, the inventor or the person who did that for the first time in 2002 actually died today. His name is Alan Cribier. He was the first person to do this transcatheter aortic valve replacement in any human being in 2002. And unfortunately, today is the day I just saw on Twitter or X that he died today. He's a giant in the field, but that technology was developed in Europe, in France, and Italy, and it has spread through the world. I started doing them in 2015, and it's a very great technology for patients. Initially, it was only for patients in whom surgery was determined to be high risk. So if you were high risk for open heart surgery, then that would be the preferred therapy. But now we can do them in patients low risk, high risk, etc. So that's another cool thing that I do. And there's some others like repair of the mitral valve that I also do, and left atrial appendage occlusion, etc., which are therapies that 5-6 years ago you would think you would need open heart surgery to do. But the field has moved very swiftly in the direction of transcatheter therapies, and I'm just happy to be one of the persons in the forefront of that.
Dr. Smith, you speak about enabling the flow of blood, and we hear a lot about people having issues with circulation. And what is the relationship between some of those heart conditions that you referred to and overall circulation, blood circulation? And what are some of the impediments to the circulation of the blood?
So there are a number of things. One, the biggest one goes back to the generating source of the circulation, and that generating source is always the heart, right? So if someone has had heart attacks, for example, and the heart function is weak, then the heart cannot squeeze enough blood out to the body to meet the demands that the body has. So that would cause a decrease. We'd call it decreased circulation of blood flow across the body. If there are valve problems, so for example, the aortic valve that I spoke about and you rightfully picked up on, if there is a narrowing in that valve, then of course enough blood wouldn't be able to leave the left side of the heart to go out into the body. But also if the mitral valve, which is also on the left side, it's supposed to keep blood from going backwards. So from the left ventricle into the left atrium. So if that valve isn't working, instead of the blood going out to the body, it goes back into the left atrium, it fills up in the lungs, and you don't have that good circulation that we would talk about. So those are the issues within the heart, and they center around how well the heart can pump, as well as how well the valves work, whether they're too narrow or leaking too much. When we get out to the circulation itself, we have the arteries or the arterial circulation, and we have the veins. And both of them can have problems that can lead to problems with circulation as well. So just as we can have narrowing of the arteries in the heart, or the arteries that supply the heart, the arteries that supply the arm, the arteries that supply the legs, the arteries that supply the brain, they can also start building up with cholesterol and plaque over time and become narrow. And if they're narrowed, of course, the blood flow through those narrowed arteries would also be decreased. And that's another form of decreased circulation. And that decreased circulation, especially to the legs, would manifest as coldness in the feet, and coldness in the legs, and sometimes the hair on the leg starts to fall off. And you know, you try to walk and you can only walk for a mile, and then your legs start to get heavy and feels as if it's tingling, and then you can't go any further. You rest for 5-10 minutes, it gets better, and then you walk again. That's a condition, or the terminology for that is claudication. It means that there's a blockage, or there are blockages somewhere that's impeding the blood flow to the legs that would allow you to do what you want to do. And when the blood flow gets, through the arterial circulation, it goes back to the heart via the venous circulation. So veins and how well the veins are working is another area where we can have problems with the circulation. Veins have valves, have these small valves that should, as the blood is moving up from the legs to the heart, etc., those valves should open and close appropriately to keep it from going back down to the legs against gravity. And one of the things we've seen a lot is if those veins don't, if the valves in those veins don't work well, then we can end up having we call it venous insufficiency, that would cause decreased circulation as well. Also, if our population, not just in the US, but across the Caribbean as well, we're getting heavier, we're getting more obese, that abdominal weight that we have that presses down on that big vein that we have in our abdomen, the inferior vena cava, that also slows blood flow down and can cause some problems in circulation. So there are a number of different things that can lead to the overall problem. I just try to see if I can break them down into the heart, which is pumping and valves, the arteries, which would be narrowing of the arteries, and the veins, which is usually problems with the valves and the veins that impedes blood from getting back up to the heart as it should.
Now, as you speak of this, I can see, I see there was an article at the end of November from one of the local media houses, and it said a large percentage of deaths recorded in Grenada is as a result of complications related to heart disease and heart failure. A major contributing factor to heart diseases and heart failure is cholesterol. And that was coming from the National Heart, Blood and Lung Institute. And we also see that on the global level, it says that heart and circulatory diseases cause around 1 in 3 deaths globally, that an estimated 20.5 million deaths in 2021, an average of 56,000 people each day, or 1 death every 1.5 seconds. What is it that makes heart attack such a major global threat to our health?
Well, heart attack is a major threat, and heart disease continue to be the leading cause of death in the world. Heart attacks happen when there are sudden blockages in the arteries of the heart, and it's particularly deadly. And if it's not deadly, it leads to heart failure because, unfortunately, the heart muscle is not a muscle that can regenerate. At least we've not gotten to that point yet. There are a lot of studies ongoing with stem cells and genetic modification studies that are ongoing to see if we can regenerate heart cells, but we can't. It means that once the cells die, they die and they cannot come back. So and these cells are also very highly dependent on oxygen. The heart beats anywhere between 60 to 100 beats per minute every single minute of every single day. So it requires a lot of oxygen. And whenever there's an abrupt decrease in blood flow, those cells die. When those cells die, one of two things can happen. You can go into a bad rhythm that we call ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. And because when that blockage happens, the area that does not receive oxygen then becomes electrically unstable. And the heart then starts to fibrillate. And if you don't have a defibrillator, you don't do bystander CPR, etc., the patient is going to die. So if the patient does not die, then that part of the heart muscle is dead, and it does not recover. So the overall heart function drops, and now you've survived the heart attack, but you now have heart failure for the rest of your life, which can, depending on the extent of heart failure and the lack of intensity of treatment, can be pretty stressful, both to the individual, as well as their families, and of course on health systems. So the overall burden of heart attacks and heart disease has been rising across the world because we've had a significant change in diet over the past 50 to 70 years. Our diet has become more westernized. We're eating more fatty foods, more saturated fats. We're not exercising as much as we used to. And that has led to also, there's been an increase in weight, leading to insulin dependence and diabetes. So the combination of all of that has led to a point now where heart disease is becoming more prevalent in countries where they were, I wouldn't say non-existent, but they weren't as prevalent as they are now. And it's very difficult for health systems to keep up, to treat these patients in the appropriate way. Because here in the US, for example, where I work and where most people would get care, if they have chest pain, they have a heart attack, they get to the hospital, we try to open up the artery of the heart within 90 minutes. If I'm on call, I get a call, jump in my car, speed in, get there, get the patient in the cath lab, open up the artery, put a stent. All of that needs to be done within 90 minutes. So that helps to save muscle. Okay. If that happens in Grenada or some of the less developed countries, we don't have that. So that ability to do what we call primary PCI is lacking. And there are also lack of appropriate protocols that we can follow to give the appropriate clot busting medications if we cannot do the stents, etc. So that has led to a higher prevalence of heart failures and deaths and so on in countries that are not as developed from a medical or cardiovascular standpoint as the US or the UK or some of the other countries in Europe.
Now, given all of that level of prevalence, what would you advise? Or let me ask first, can diet and lifestyle, or what role can diet and lifestyle play in alleviating some of these prospective heart challenges and circulatory challenges?
So diet and lifestyle are foundational and pivotal things that we can do to decrease or limit the incidence of heart disease and heart attacks. I will preface it by saying it is not a one size fit all, and it's not a cure for everything, because underlying everything that happens to us is a genetic component, right? And there are some people they're born with bad genes. Their genetic component is just so that regardless of what they do, what they eat, how much exercise they exercise, if it's going to catch up with them, it will eventually, but it can be modified. Okay, so let's say someone has a gene that makes them very prone to having very high bad cholesterol levels. If they don't do anything, then they might get a heart attack at 40. If they watch their diet, they exercise, and they take all the necessary precautions to prevent diabetes, being overweight, etc., it is possible that they might not have. They would have the gene, but since the gene does not get the substrate for which it can work, then that can push their heart disease back 10 years or 20 years before something actually happens. So I would preface it to say that not just because you have or you're having good diet and exercising and so on that you would never get heart disease. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that at the basic core of management of ischemic heart disease is the management of cholesterol. And the management of cholesterol is very heavily dependent on our diet. It's very heavily dependent on activity levels, how well we exercise. It's very heavily dependent on insulin and insulin metabolism. So if we're overweight, it makes it worse. If we eat all of the fatty foods, and not just fatty foods, but a lot of starches as well, because that gets converted to sugars, and then sugars can get converted to fat. And that also has a role to play. So if you look back at, I think just thinking back to when I was younger, living in Grenada, just from the eyeball test, the average weight of people now is way above what it used to be just 20, 25 years ago. So just by that standard, the fight against heart disease has gotten worse, because now we don't have to just deal with, hey, this is a person who has normal weight, so let's just try to get them to exercise. Now we have to lose weight, improve glycemic control, improve the way insulin works, and so many other barriers that we have to overcome. So I do agree with you that diet, exercise, although I would say again, it's not the 100% cure, but I think that they are fundamental in decreasing the prevalence of heart disease and heart attacks that we have. And if I may say, it is not just on an individual level. It is also on a societal and economic level, because the cost of treating a heart attack, the cost of getting somebody into the hospital to put stents into the heart, the cost of doing what I do is astronomical. And it is impossible, it would be impossible for small developing island countries like ours to be able to have the capital to invest in the type of equipment that we'll need to do this at that particular scale. So the efforts have to be on these things that are modifiable, that we can work on, that are not too difficult to implement and are not exorbitantly costly to our governments and to the ministries and to even the other non-governmental agencies that are trying to help from a health standpoint. These are things that we have within our control to help us decrease the prevalence of heart disease in Grenada.
Well, actually, Dr. Smith, you have more or less begun to answer the question I was just about to ask you, which is, given the challenges that we face in terms of what you outlined a while ago, not having some of the infrastructure, the facilities and stuff like that, what advice would you give to our authorities in terms of managing the situation as it presently stands? uh, until we can make the kind of improvements that are obviously in the pipeline, because we hear our government spoke about the building of a new hospital that will be better equipped, and so a teaching hospital and all of that. And we expect that the facilities are going to be available. Although there's another matter that I need to raise with you along these lines, but let's deal with this one for now. What would be the appropriate approach for the authorities in terms of mitigating these kinds of situations?
So, these are, conversations that can become very, very contentious very quickly, because I know um, since everyone has access to social media and you can see what's happening here, there, and everywhere, then it is just assumed that these things can be deployed in any situation. But heart health.
I think I
The,
think I
the,
think
the,
I
the,
think generally speaking, our people do appreciate the fact that our health system has been challenged, and it's not something that can be fixed overnight, but we appreciate the fact that incrementally we can, if we make the effort, that we can get there. And in some instances, the management of the situation is critical. I think we need to grow up. 50, at 50, we need to have a level of maturity that helps us to appreciate having conversations that is going to bring out the 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 um the approaches that we need, the answers that we need in order to remedy situations. And these answers are not always, they don't come easy. Okay, so
totally agree. I totally agree. So from a practical perspective, what we can do now is adopt what I'd call more of the Cuban model.
okay.
Um, and the Cuban model is a model that's heavily dependent on primary care physicians, um, doctors who see patients regularly, screen patients regularly, um, and therefore, if they're screening, they're able to pick up diseases earlier and get them treated earlier in the life cycle of the disease. So, if we go back to COVID-19 and the COVID-19 pandemic, that is something that opened a lot of people's eyes, because it is something that was killing people. So, what we did was, hey, let's start testing, right? That testing was to diagnose COVID-19, but also to screen, right? You want to see who has the disease and who doesn't. And if you have the disease, then you get quarantined for a particular period of time. We need to take similar approaches to the way we manage cholesterol and high blood pressure, right? There needs to be appropriate screening guidelines within the Caribbean context for primary care physicians to easily and in an affordable manner be able to screen for cholesterol, LP little a, cholesterol subtyping, etc., so that patients who are at risk from a genetic standpoint because they have a familial component to the high cholesterol that we're battling, they know upfront. And then we can get these patients on medications earlier if medications are needed, or they can intentionally implement lifestyle changes that would lead to better health down the line. It is a nice tag phrase to say diet and exercise. But if someone knows, if someone has been tested and they know, hey, my bad cholesterol is through the roof, and my risk of having a heart attack within 10 years is 90%, that is in and of itself powerful enough to drive change for that particular patient. It is not simply to say, hey, your cholesterol high, right, as we normally do, but to give clear, concrete numbers to say, this is your risk profile for heart attack or or cardiovascular disease from a Caribbean perspective within the next 10 years. And that is going to drive changes in behavior, is going to then put the onus on our patients and our citizens to exercise, whether it be running, swimming, biking, hiking, whatever, and to pay more attention to the diet that they consume, and that in the long run is going to lead to decreased healthcare spending overall, because we're acting at the root of the problem, not when the problem blossoms into a fruit that we then have to be like, oh my gosh, what's going on now?
Have you found fasting up? Is that something that you can speak to? What role can fasting play in treating or in in controlling some of those health challenges that we have? Can fasting play a role in that?
So there are some studies that have shown intermittent fasting to be beneficial to cardiovascular health. Fasting, is something that goes back even to biblical days. So there is a role for fasting. I don't think we've been able to identify exactly how long, what type of fasting, and exactly how long is the most beneficial. But as in everything we do, always having a reset, always stopping for a while so that the body resets itself and then restarting. Usually just not that we're computers, but sometimes when your computer is giving trouble, the first thing you do is like you shut it off and you restart, okay? And then everything starts to work, and we don't know why, right? So sometimes that happens with fasting, right? You have this particular ailment, you fast for a while, and you start back, and things start to work. We don't know exactly why that happens. The body is very complex, and we think that there are some signaling pathways that need to just be rebooted, and that happens. But to answer your question, yes, there is evidence that intermittent fasting does help in some cardiovascular conditions.
We see qualified medical doctors becoming trained and qualified in what is called holistic or natural health treatments. You hear a lot about complementary medicine these days. What's your take on all of these developments in the health arena?
I think that's good. I think within reason, there's a room for complementary medicine in the way we practice. In China and Japan and the Far East countries, complementary medicine is a big part or an integral part of how they treat patients. I go back to the definition of health and wellness as not just being the absence of disease, but it's a complete wellness from a physical, emotional, spiritual standpoint. So complementary medicine, whether it be by addressing lifestyles, by addressing mental health, by using natural herbs and supplements that have been proven to work, I think that those are all good things for the medical community. And these are things that we in a Caribbean and Grenada setting should be looking into to modify to build our brand of medicine that's appropriate to our setting, that is not overly burdensome in terms of cost, because we need to keep that in mind as we as we have healthcare discussions. Every healthcare discussion here in the US centers around cost, because although things are convenient, they're very costly. So if Grenada, we're at 50 years, it's still young in terms of age of a country. We have to strategize as we go forward. How are we going to continue to develop our people, develop medicine within Grenada, within an appropriate cost structure? And certainly complementary medicine should be a part of the discussion, because it would help us to tailor our brand of medicine and what we do to our context, and not necessarily import wholesale from the US or England or other countries where that cost is prohibitively high for us at this particular time.
Dr. Smith, we have a situation in Grenada. You are from Guelph, and you know that we have a brand new facility in Guelph where the health center, as we knew it, stood before. It's a brand new facility. It's supposed to be a polyclinic, but we appear to have some challenges in getting it adequately outfitted. A colleague of mine who knows, the operations that's going on there and so on, he alerted me recently that presently, when I was growing up, and I probably during your time too, the health center was a place where mothers went and delivered babies. That is not the case presently. Reportedly, they open from, I don't know from what time in the morning, but up until 7 on Monday to Thursday. And then on weekends, it's 24. They go for 24 hours. I don't know if during the week people have a measurement as to, the times that they fall ill. But so that after 7, it's closed, but on weekends it goes all the way. What would you advise? Are you in any position to lend some ideas, some thought as to how we can go about ensuring that this polyclinic is up and functioning as it ought to be, as we would like it to be? Probably a voice like yours, somebody of your stature, somebody of your status, making, saying whatever it is, can go a long way in terms of encouraging the authorities or whoever they may be, to ensure that the facility, it looks good on the outside. It's a beautiful facility. Tell you the truth, I have never entered it, but the reports that I've gotten, generally speaking, what it needs is to be equipped so that we can address some of those things that you've been talking about, because you've already indicated that the whole issue of having appropriate equipment is a challenge.
So thanks for that question. Fortunately, I was able to walk through that facility a few months ago. I was in Grenada for a short period of time. Okay. And I was able to walk through it. And it is a very beautiful facility. I think not just for that facility, but the whole Grenada medical system, what we need is a national comprehensive health plan. What level of care is going to be delivered where? right? So a place like Goa, for example, where this polyclinic was placed, it's a perfect place to have um, maternal health. There's no reason why we can't go back to the days when babies were being delivered there. There's a wonderful delivery area with space for delivery bed and overnight stay, etc. in that region, which should be able to accommodate most of the patients from St. Patrick's, St. Mark's, St. John. So that, in my mind, should be the role of the polyclinic in Guelph to give secondary level care to those patients. So cuts, bruises, um, fevers, chills, all of that should be able to go to that facility where they'll be able to get, whether it be x-rays, ultrasounds, the primary diagnostics, blood work, etc., and be adequately treated there without having to go all the way down to St. George's, right? Now, when we get to the higher areas where, okay, this is a high risk pregnancy, for example. If that high risk pregnancy goes to that polyclinic, we know it's high risk, there's an ambulance, and that particular patient gets to go down to the general hospital. So the general hospital knows there's a high risk pregnancy coming, and everyone is prepared for that high risk pregnancy to come in. What happens now is if everyone goes to the general hospital, all deliveries are happening there. No one knows who's high risk, who's not high risk. And then there isn't, I should say there isn't, but it's more difficult to do the appropriate triaging of those patients when everyone goes there in mass. So if we have a polyclinic in Guelph, we have a polyclinic somewhere down in St. Andrews or close to that St. Andrews, St. David's area that can deal with all of the secondary things. Someone's blood pressure is high and they have a headache. They can go there, get some IV medicines or get some oral medicines, be observed for between 4 to 12 hours, everything is okay, they go home. Then that decreases the level of stress on the general hospital. And the general hospital should be used for the higher level tertiary care things, patients with strokes who needs adequate attention, patients with heart attacks who need adequate attention, patients with severe sepsis who needs to be closely monitored because they might end up on a ventilator. Those sort of things are what we should be pushing towards the general hospital and have the lower acuity, less intense conditions treated in places like Guelph and Grenville or somewhere in St. Andrews. Now, yes, equipment is an issue. So just having 1 or 2 ultrasound machines in Guelph, I think they need at least 1 X-ray machine. There's a beautiful dental area there where I think very good dentistry can be done. And having that maternity area for low risk deliveries, I think is good. So we'll be able to provide all of the immediate care for those patients there, and then only send down to St. George's or what it seems to be soon to be St. David's, right? The higher acuity, more difficult cases that need specific specialist intervention.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
We also have to look at, the type of equipment that we're going to get. There's been a massive movement away from these larger ultrasound machines, etc. There's some small portable handheld ultrasound machines that are more reasonably cost effective. Instead of $125,000, you can get a very good handheld ultrasound for between 8 to 10,000 US, which functions for most of the things that we would need. these can be deployed in the communities, and we can have the larger ultrasound machines for the more in-depth procedures at the hospital as well. So I think we have to relook what medical technology looks like and what the capabilities of newer, smaller, more intelligent platforms can do, and not just depend on always wanting the most expensive thing that's out there, because that might be out of our reach.
We hear about the building of a new facility and new hospital. If Grenada is going to have a new hospital, what do you think should be the major focus of delivery in terms of the services coming out of such a facility?
So the major things to come out of that facility should be, of course, I'm biased, cardiovascular, but we just said that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer in the world. So it should have a strong cardiovascular focus. It should have a very strong oncology or cancer focus. Oncology and the wide range of cancer diagnoses that I'm seeing coming out of the Caribbean is very astounding. So there has to be a focus on that, not just for treatment, but also research as to why, what type of cancers are occurring and why they're occurring. Maternal services and high risk pregnancy, as well as neonatology, I think is important. That's one of the metrics that the World Health Organization looks at when they're judging how well your health system works. Infant mortality as well as maternal mortality. So I do think that should also be a strong focus. And orthopedics is another one, because we have a lot of patients or a lot of people with joint issues, etc., back problems, etc., that can benefit from having very good orthopedic services in Grenada. So those are the big ones I can think of the top of my head, and of course, coupled with that, as we said, doing a very robust, comprehensive national health policy that would take into account all of the chronic illnesses that we have across the country, to have them addressed, like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, etc. I did not include mental health here in that new hospital, although I know mental health is a big issue because we already have Montague Hospital for that. So I did not include it in what I think should be our big focus at this time. I would couch that with the caveat of what the final strategy for the hospital is going to be. Are we going to be catering mostly to Grenadians? Are we expecting other nationals to come in from other Caribbean countries? And or are we also going to be exploring into the health tourism space? Because that's a whole different discussion that we'll need to have, which is also very involved, because if we're going to get into medical tourism, the biggest thing for medical tourism at this time is, cosmetic surgery. So if that's the route we're going to go, then that has to be a big pillar for what we're going to do. So I have some thoughts around those. I don't know if this is the forum for it, but wherever you want to go with this, we can go.
Dr. Smith, you keep just, it's like you're preempting the questions that I'm going to ask you. Although we didn't have a conversation about this specifically, because this is where I was going next, the whole issue of health tourism. What do you see as Grenada's prospects in that regard? I mean, I've heard our Prime Minister, he himself, you've just mentioned about the whole issue of what's the terminology?
the teaching hospital and that
No,
kind of
not the
stuff.
teaching
Yeah.
hospital. Those
The
facials and stuff.
okay, the cosmetics. Yeah.
Cosmetic,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the cosmetic arena. I know that our Prime Minister has spoken about that too. So what do you think Grenada needs to do to be best positioned with a new hospital and all of that? What would Grenada really need to do to position itself to benefit from health tourism?
So here's the deal. I don't think it would make sense to just build another hospital to build another hospital. Okay. And whatever plans are in place and whatever hospital is built has to be sustainable from a revenue standpoint. Because if we don't do that, what has happened to our current hospital is going to happen again to this hospital that we built. It's going to be a new facility. There's going to be nothing in it. So there has to be a revenue generator somewhere along the line. And whether that revenue for the hospital comes from a partnership agreement with a medical school or medical schools that can provide the necessary funding to adequately equip and outfit the hospital so that it keeps functioning, or whether we develop service lines that are lucrative enough and competitive enough to attract paying customers from outside of Grenada to then have that revenue reinvested in our product so that it gets better. So it has to be one of those two strategies. Or the third strategy would be doing the hospital in partnership with another big name hospital somewhere, and this hospital being a subsidiary of it. Now, again, these are just ideas that I'm throwing out there. But at the end of the day, whatever is done, and what I think the central focus has to be in whatever form that hospital takes, is that it has to be self-sufficient. It has to generate enough revenue to sustain itself and grow. And certainly, health tourism or health tourism medicine is something that can do that. When you look at Costa Rica, for example, I think that's the leading health tourism destination in the world at this point in time. They're pulling in, I think it's close to $10 billion a year in health tourism. And then you also have the Dominican Republic that also has a very robust health tourism industry. And the one in the Dominican Republic is based more on cosmetics. So a lot of the cosmetic surgery is not covered by insurance in the United States. So people pay for those out of pocket. So having a cheaper option definitely helps. That being said, if we're going to go into health tourism and we're going to target the cosmetics market, Dominican Republic is closer to the US. Costa Rica is more or less more well known. What brand are we going to have to attract those patients? So branding is a big thing. All right. So what is going to make you bypass the Dominican Republic where your friend had something done to come to Grenada? And the other would be branding, one, and two, what legal mechanism do we have in place to ensure that we cover liabilities? Because that's one of the other areas that I think we need to take into account. How mature is our health legal policies that would give people the confidence that if they come to Grenada to have something done and it's not done correctly, or they are injured or there's some malpractice, that they will be appropriately indemnified in that case. So I think those are the two big things that we need to work out as we head into health tourism as a product. What I like is having a health system that doesn't necessarily target health tourism per se, but increases or improves your tourism product. Okay, so I would argue that if there is a 72-year-old man who has 2 stents in his heart sitting in Colorado, and he's thinking, I want to go on a vacation, one of the things that's on his mind is, oh, if something happens to my heart, when I'm on vacation, where do I go? And who do I see? And what's going to happen to me? Yes, you can buy health insurance, but you want to have that certainty that where you're going to enjoy your 2 weeks vacation, should something happen, that there are facilities in place to take care of you. So I think the onus on us as a country is to develop or to build a hospital and develop programs within that hospital that are robust enough, that can give people confidence that if they have a condition, if they are a dialysis patient, for example, and the dialysis patient can go without 2 to 3 days without dialysis, but you come to Grenada and there's a dialysis center, that's a huge pool of tourists and travelers that we would have never gotten, but we will now get just because Grenada has a dialysis center. Same for a cardiovascular center of excellence, etc. Especially if it is, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, especially if it is linked to a well-known brand like Cleveland Clinic or Johns Hopkins or a Mayo Clinic. So as we build this infrastructure of a hospital, we also have to build the partnership strategy and the marketing strategy that can go along with it, that will be able to pull patients, not just from Grenada, but from other areas, and give them the confidence that Grenada has the capacity to deal with whatever issues that might arise, or that it can become the preferred destination for certain types of treatments within the Caribbean, and also Latin America, Central and South America. I think we're positioned geographically in an area where, if we were to develop something that blows everyone else out of the water, we'll be able to pull patients from South America, Central America to Grenada, who are paying customers, who can then support or subsidize the care for our population in Grenada itself. And I have no doubt about that. We just need to figure out what that strategy is.
Dr. Smith, we have Brother John Calise here with us, and I'm certain that he's itching to get in on the conversation and to ask a question or to make an observation. Brother John? Brother John? Are you with us? Your mic is muted. Your mic is muted.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I was listening patiently. There's just a lot of different people calling for different things here and trying to attend to everybody. I was listening. Dr. Tristan, thank you again. And I think I saw you at the gala. I think I'm just looking back at my mental steps. I thought probably we crossed paths last Saturday night, if you was at the dinner. I don't know.
No,
No?
no.
Okay. I looking back, looking at your image and the poster, I think, did I see him at the thing? I saw a lot of people, look like me, we know here, all around and giving me high five and bouncing me and then just moving on and say, I know this guy. You know what I mean? And then a lady came up to me, I was talking to another guy, look like you. Anyways, I said, you don't know me, no? I said, no. He said, I watch you all the time on Facebook and your show. I said, really? So I'm just, because you meet people all the time now because people know my face everywhere. But listening to you and very inspiring, very encouraging. And I hope our younger men and women in Grenada would have access to you as a mentor to aspire to be in the field that you are in right now. Because the way I see it, I think one of the aspirations of the PRG was to have enough doctors to satisfy the health needs of the population. You make mention of diagnostic check, dealing with people before the real problem comes up, right? Pre-treatment, studying what happened to people before it become, don't treat the symptom, but find the root cause. And those things I think is very critically necessary for us as a people. In most of the people in long-term care, they would have been able to probably get treatment for some of the disease they deal with if they had the proper personnel to address those conditions before you get to that stage. Even with heart attacks and like I mentioned, we don't have to have open heart surgeries. Again, as privileged as we used to have it before. I'm very much interested to see more of those things take place, surgeries take place in Grenada with a doctor like you on hand. I think you'll be a very good asset to Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. However, I know you talk about the Guelph facility and should probably have those small care pockets taking place in Grenville and and so on. What would it take for the system, in your view, to make those facilities readily available to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique?
I think it takes investment in the necessary equipment. I do believe that we have the appropriate manpower in terms of physicians. There are a number of physicians who are in Grenada who I trained with in Cuba. There are a number of them in Grenada who trained after me or before, and I see their work, and I know they are trying their best within the limitations they have. But what we need is a proper assessment of the equipment that we need and raise the necessary funds for it, whether it be by petitioning the diaspora, people like me and you and others who are challenge us to come up with donations, not just a one-off donation here and there, but things that fall within the comprehensive structure of what they're trying to do. Full disclosure, I am a part of the Grenada Diaspora Advisory Council that was set up or that's supported by the current government to try to come up with helping from that standpoint, and behind the scenes we are doing some work in terms of trying to get donations, etc., for Grenada within our scope of those of us who are up here. But that's what it takes. Just as we rallied around the 50th anniversary celebration, we need to rally around health. We need we need something that's tangible for us to say, this is what we're going to do. And once we see that plan and we say we need 5 ultrasound machines, 4 X-ray machines, XY, this is where it's going to go, this is what we're going to do, and we can physically see on a map where these things are going to go, I think we'll be more optimistic in giving. Grenadians are very philanthropic. We love to give. We love to see. We love to help our fellow brothers and sisters. But that clear outline of that plan has to be there. And I think once it's there, we can help with sourcing equipment as well as deploying equipment, teaching and training our physicians and staff, etc., how to use them appropriately, etc.
You mentioned the Cuban model of healthcare. How far away is Grenada from that model? And if there is a model like that, and how would you implement a model like that in Grenada to ensure proper healthcare for our people?
We are not far. We are not far because there are, in fact, our model at this point is very close to the Cuban model. It's just not being implemented in the same way. Because the Cuban model, basically everyone has to see the doctor at least once a year, basically, right? Whereas in Grenada, you can still not go if you don't want to. But we do have district medical officers that patients can go to free of cost. The issue comes with when they have to do the testing and get the medications, etc. That's not free of cost. So that's where the problem comes. The Cuban model is very heavily primary care centric, with screening and preventative maintenance.
Yes.
As well as looking out for mental health and other things within the society that can affect one's health. Right. So that's what the Cuban model is based on. And you only move from, so for example, you can't just go from your home to the heart hospital, for example. You have to go to your primary doctor. Your primary doctor then sends you to the polyclinic. The polyclinic sends you to your regional hospital. If the regional hospital thinks that you need something for your heart, that's when you get to go to the heart hospital. You don't get to just go and say, I want my heart checked, right? So that is the kind of model I think we need, so that we get the appropriate escalation and the appropriate care at that level, and not, because someone can go in and say, I want my heart checked, you do all of the testing and everything comes back normal, when it was probably the esophagus, or probably just acid reflux. And then you spend thousands of dollars doing a bunch of tests that probably was not needed.
Okay. I want to ask, what's the correlation between a swollen feet and heart disease?
So that goes back to our conversation earlier about the circulation, right? So if the heart does not squeeze well, the body senses that, because if the heart isn't squeezing well, enough blood isn't getting into the arteries of the heart, and the arteries of the heart sense that they're underfilled. So because they feel as if they don't have enough blood flow, it makes you hold on to fluid. And that's just a crude way of saying it. It makes you, because the arteries aren't expanded as much as they should be, it sends that signal to the body, to the kidneys, that, hey, I need more fluid. So the kidneys don't get rid of water, and then you start filling up with water, and then just because of gravity, it settles in the feet. So that's just the general idea for that. If the heart isn't functioning well, if it's not squeezing well. The other is if the veins aren't working well, if the valves in the veins aren't working well, then the blood flow that's supposed to go from the feet back up into the chest doesn't happen appropriately. So the blood sort of stagnates in the feet, and fluids start to seep out of the veins, etc. And you start having swollen feet. And then other things like nutrition, if you don't have enough protein and so on in the body, that comes up as well. But those are the two major things that will cause swelling of the legs.
One more question before I go. I get called to return to business. The overall one with the lineup there. you make mention about chest pain in terms of identifying or trying to figure out what is if you really are having a heart attack or such and that. For me, sometimes I feel like if you don't eat something and you just eat it one big swallow, I can't ever leave that. Sometimes I don't eat anything, I don't see it, and I feel that pain, like not the pain, but kind of a lump like pressure in
discomfort.
discomfort. Is this a sign of a dysfunctional heart, or of not enough energy, not enough oxygen, or not enough blood flow, or returning, like you said earlier on, it could be the blood is not returning as it should? What would be that cause?
So it could be. It could be. Now, if you would tell me you get that sensation every time you walk, then I would say that is most likely the heart. If you tell me it just happens when you're sitting there and it happens sometimes, or it happens when you're sitting or you lie down or something like that, then usually, and not all the time, usually it's not the heart, because the heart, the discomfort that comes on most of the times with heart disease is discomfort with activity. You try to do something and the heart rate goes up and the heart squeezes a little harder, and you just don't have enough blood flow to that particular segment of the heart to keep up. And that's when you get the discomfort. If you're sitting there or you're lying down, sometimes there's acid reflux that can, just go back from the stomach into the esophagus, and that causes a spasm in the esophagus that you can have that sort of sensation as well. So,
I think the latter is mine, because sometimes I'm just sitting here and then just feel I'll go drink some water and and try to think it's a lump of food, probably it didn't swallow properly, and just eat a big piece of bread. And so I just get some water and drink, and then wait a while and go away. It don't last for long. It's a short period of time. So that was my question here.
Yeah, in those cases, it's probably just the esophagus. But if it comes on with any sort of exertion, any type of, try walking up the steps, for example, and you're getting it, then that's when I'll be more concerned.
Okay, so I'm safe. I'm in a safe zone for now.
However, that's the heart of the matter.
However, yes. However, one more question. My family I have my sisters one of sisters in England. She has swollen feet, swollen hands. I have another sister, a couple of them have swollen feet. And all doctors they checked, and in England she checked, and there's no diagnosis really on the matter. I sometimes have a swollen feet too, and it goes away. If I lie down and hit my foot up, it goes away completely. But it seems to be a generational thing. But only a few of us have it. The rest doesn't have it.
So the fact that when you put your feet up, it goes away, leads me to think that it's more of a venous problem. Because once you overcome that gravitational pull, it goes away completely. It's usually venous, and so the veins probably aren't working well. So that's where I would start looking if I were you, for a diagnosis of this condition. It's probably just venous insufficiency that's causing it.
And what would be, just off the box, what would be the quickest method of treatment?
Well, the quickest method of treatment for that is compression stockings. So just very tight stockings that goes up to the knees or to the mid thigh, to just compress all of that fluid back up into towards the heart. And I prefer although I'm an interventional cardiologist, I usually like doing non-interventional things first. If there are venous problems, then there are things we can do, like sclerotherapy for the veins, if those veins are dysfunctional. But I always like trying non-invasive, non-interventional things first before putting anything in or altering the body in any way.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I got to run. I will leave Pablo. Pablo, thank you for me.
Brother John. Well, actually, we've only got just a couple of minutes to go, because we started coming down on 3:30, and it's coming up on 5 o'clock now. So our 90 minutes has still gone by, in a flash.
A flash, yeah.
Yes, so it's just at the point in time where, I would ask Dr. Smith to just round the things up for us, given the fact that we have this prevalence of heart attacks, strokes, and so taking place in the country. You know, what final words of advice would you give to Grenadians? You know, people living in an environment where we ought to be exposed to when nature is free to us, not like where the majority of us are stuck up in, you know, in the concrete environment. We have all of nature around us, and the prospect of you know, having fresh food. You know, how important do you see our our sustainability, having a sustainable source of food supply, you know, enabling
So,
us, enabling us, I should say, to be in a better position to handle these kind of situations, to treat these kind of situations.
so I would say that we all need to.
Before you go on, you said you were here recently. I'm certain that you've seen more amputees than you did back then when you were a boy growing up.
Yes, yes, definitely a lot more. Definitely a lot more amputations. That goes back to the circulation and the heart discussion that we had before. And that's one of the areas I'm going to, um, as we move forward, try to engage more with the local physicians as well as with the local authorities from a Ministry of Health standpoint to look at policies we have and probably interventions that we can do to prevent the amount of amputations that we have happening, because some of those um, can be, I think, avoided um, if we catch them early and we're able to revascularize. If someone like me could, you know, just open it up with balloons and stents and have the blood flowing back down to the feet instead of allowing it to become gangrenous. I think that's a good first step we can take, doing those interventions in the legs, etc., where risk is lower from a complication standpoint, and then we can probably start tackling, you know, blockages in the hearts and valves and so on after. This is a dream of mine. It is really a dream of mine to be able to provide that level of care in Grenada. I think it's possible. Um, I think the as we build a new hospital, etc., the infrastructure, we have to think well about the infrastructure that we're going to put there. And I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to rally the necessary people with the expertise that can help me and others on the team um, do some of those interventions in Grenada to help prevent, at least help prevent some of those amputations we've seen. As we wrap up, I would say we all need to take individual responsibility. I think individual responsibility is the key to our healthcare. Um, we like to point fingers. We like to say this one isn't doing this and the government isn't doing that, and this person isn't doing that. But at the end of the day, our lives and our health belongs to us. So we have to be good stewards of that. And part of being good stewards is living a healthy lifestyle as much as we can. Part of that does have to do with food security. I know that's something um, small island developing states are very concerned about. Um, our food import bill is super high, and we need to, not just in a campaign slogan way, say get back to the farm. It has to be something that's tangible and actually doable. There's no reason, you know, that we in the Caribbean can't be uh, self-sufficient in the uh, food security space. I mean, we have Trinidad, we have Grenada, we have Barbados. We have so many different countries that can produce on a larger scale for us to use within the Caribbean, where the foods will be fresher, more nutritious, etc. So we need to look at multi country collaboration within the Caribbean and also within Grenada. What can we do to help our farmers in Grenada. I know there've been talks of being more stringent on pre-deal larceny, for example. I mean, we depend on our farmers for healthy foods, and farmers shouldn't have to be poor in order to do that. We have to make sure that they're well compensated and that there are protections in place for their produce so that it doesn't go to waste, so that they know when they put the effort in that the products are going to be sold and they're going to get some sort of return on it. And that comprehensive health policy that I spoke about must take into account food security and sustainability for Grenada and the wider Caribbean as we move forward. Because food is our first medicine. Whether we want to think of it like that or not, food is our first medicine. And if the food is inadequate, if the food does not meet the requirements that we need, then we won't be able to solve our health crisis problem in Grenada anytime soon.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Smith, and I think that's a good point to close out on the whole issue of being able to feed ourselves. And I recall during the period of the revolution, this had been a major focus of not just the mantra, but the efforts that were made. It was about being more self-sufficient in terms of being able to feed ourselves. But we've seen that from that dispensation to this one, instead of becoming more proficient at that, more sustainable at that, we have become more deficient at that. And I believe the 50th anniversary of independence is a good starting point, given the kind of conversations and the impact that it has had on people emotionally and otherwise. It is a good starting point for us to begin to regroup and to regain and to return to some of those values that we have lost along the way. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for sharing as you have, and for making us aware of things that we had no clue, the level of involvement that you already have, in terms of lending your services and providing your services, not just to the administration, but to the country of Grenada. And I look forward to that comprehensive health plan that you've spoken about, that is going to take into consideration also the whole sustainable element of us being able to feed ourselves and so on. So thank you very much, Dr. Smith, and I look forward to having you sometime again on the GEM FM platform. All the best to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And thank you to those who would have taken time off to join us. As Brother John, his mantra is education is liberation. And I'm certain that those of you who would have taken time off to be here this afternoon would have been edified from the information, the presentation, and so on that has been forthcoming from Dr. Tristan Smith. And we are all grateful to him for sharing with us as he has done. So thank you all. See you next week. Next week, I'll be having Dalton, the man who is building the Kalinago village in the east of the country. Dalton is going to be on with me next week. So the Kalinago man will be here next week, God's will. All right, Brother John.
All right, thank you so much, Pablo. Again, it'll be a plum pleasing pleasure as well as a privilege of both of you using and sitting on the platform of GEM FM again and again. Doctor, feel free. You're home, GEM FM. You don't have something to share with us as Grenadians. Call me up, call Pablo up, say, hey, look, I've got to share some new stuff with you guys, new technologies, so people can be more aware of what is available to them in the world in the field of medicine and surgeries and everything medical that you share with us as a people. We'll be more than happy to have you share it here. So keep our people informed because we want to educate them to liberate them. You have better choices. They know what the choices are that they could make. So again, thank you so much. I know something you mentioned before you go there. Amputation, Pablo. I have two of my very good friends. My cousin, an African teller, died of gangrene. And Dr. here probably have been a good source in aiding, helping to avoid those amputations, and saving some lives so people spend more time, more quality time with family and friends. So I'm looking forward to a day when you, doctor, could go back to Grenada with a team of people to help address that problem of amputation that we see happening in Grenada. So again, I look forward to bigger, better, and greater things medically.
Well, Dr. Smith, it is very likely that you know this guy, short guy from Dr. Bell, who we called Little Man.
Yes.
And he died recently. And it is believed that he would have grieved as a consequence of becoming an amputee. Recently I understand that they cut the leg all the way up and so on and so forth. And he didn't last long afterwards. And I think grief would have factored into that passing. Yeah. So all right. So all the best. That's where we close the Heart of the Matter for the third time for the year. Okay. All the best. Cheers.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. Wow. This was beautiful. Wow.
The people feeling, people celebrating, the people feeling. A prophet stated Spice Island was so gaining independence to Gary in 74. 79 rebel and unrest in the 80s. Through all the problem of resilience in 2020, we are form of vision. We're still training the nation's mission in health and housing and education. Awarding outstanding citizens, Lord. The nation buzzing, masters and whispering. This year's milestone a big scene. Yes, we live to see the reality, fulfillment of prophecy. Oh, na. All on the street, people dancing. If you see them, hear the ball, oh, Mama is so great. You will celebrate. Love we demonstrate. Stand up for man, keep the faith. Mama is so young, but you're brave and strong. You are champion.